there's a difference between the military as a calling or if the nation is in peril. We go back to the time of the Greeks. If you're a Greek citizen and your country called, you went.
Yeah.
Wouldn't matter if you're whatever you were, a basket weaver or anything.
Yeah.
The country mobilised. And you've got that in Switzerland today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Haven't seen an angry man with a stone to throw for 300 years.
Yeah.
You serve in the military till you're 65.
But the Swiss seem to have an interesting political system that even though they've got 3 or 4 different language groups, they do seem to have a strong national identity.
Exactly.
And national identity is an interesting one because, come the First World War, and the Australian legend, the mateship, Gallipoli, tended to bring the country together and form an unique Australian identity.
It was.
And that carried through into the Second World War in Korea and then Vietnam, whereas the army was the military were on a pedestal that seemed to be kicked out from under them. And I still think that's going on. And things where it comes to your country and being proud of your country, it seems to be going the opposite. Everyone is saying bad things about Australia. Or not everyone, but you turn on the media and it's all about the things that we should be ashamed of.
Well, this is very common with Ben Roberts-Smith.
Yeah.
And a number of others in the same thing.
Yeah.
As Rudyard Kipling said, single men in barracks don't grow into plaster saints.
No.
And that was a dirty war.
Yeah.
And he also said, if you're left lying wounded in Afghanistan's plains and the women come out with knives to cut out what remains, roll to your rifle and blow out your brains and go to your God like a soldier.
Yeah.
That's just as applicable today.
Yeah.
With the attitude, if they got hold of you, God help you.
Well, the British had 2 Afghan wars and they suffered enormous casualties, and then they had the retreat from Kabul, I think, and 20,000 people started out, and I think one guy on a horse made it just to get the message through. But it's a cruel country, and in cruelty since Alexander the Great through to the Russians and the Western allies, it's how they do business. And then I think, Ben Roberts-Smith won a Victoria Cross, and I think we should treat people who've done that for their country with a lot of respect. And
the whole thing with that, and the whole thing with this report that's come in and what's gone on since about justifying your medal.
Your Brereton report,
You don't write yourself up.
No.
Somebody else wrote it up. And that had to go through to the highest level, through whoever put him in for the medal, up through the chain of command, up to the Honours and Awards Board. And they've got to sign off on it, which means I don't know how many people have decided that he's entitled to that award. So how anybody who's been given an award is told that you've got to justify the award to keep it, to me, it's just rubbish.
I mean, to get on a Victoria Cross, you really have to be a person of impeccable standing in the military.
And outstandingly brave and outstandingly lucky.
Yeah, all of the above. Yeah. And they will go through things with a fine-tooth comb, because the last thing the military wants is for, anything to go wrong. At the higher ends of the military, obviously, it gets quite political. But it just seems to me like a witch hunt. That's how it looks to me. I mean, some of the things that happen in war are not pleasant, but, I think you got to back those guys that went out there. And the amount, like you did 3 tours, your first 2 tours were 12 months.
Yeah.
So that's 2 years of your life, followed by another 10 months, leading up to 72 and the withdrawal. Now the current military have a kind of a 6-month, as I understand it, tour.
Probably along those lines.
But I spoke to an ex-commando in Toowoomba, and he'd done 5 tours, 5 or 6 tours. So that takes it out of people, and I think
they start to burn out.
Yeah, I think it does, and they
were sent there to limit casualties.
Yeah,
as being more professional chiefs. They were far more likely to be successful. And I'm not denigrating anybody.
Yeah.
Like there were no battalion fights. There probably weren't even any company fights.
Yeah.
It was patrol fights and half squadron fights with very professional people.
Yeah.
And even then we suffered casualties for one reason or another.
I mean, the other thing, I suppose, you got the... it's easy to judge from the cheap seats. You know, it's easy to be judgmental and point the bone at someone. But the Australian military did so much for the civilian population.
And they always have. They did a magnificent job in Vietnam with the hearts and minds.
Yeah, and we're you know, they got credit from the Vietnamese for that. And obviously a lot of Vietnamese came out after the war to Australia. Yeah. And I think they've added a lot to Australian society. They're hard working and they study hard at school and they do
well. Good luck to them.
And some of them go off have got into the drugs and Parramatta and that, but a lot of them, you know, wanted to live in Australia because they'd met Australian people and figured it was a good place to live and supported, you know, some of the Australian war effort. But the thing is, it's easy to judge from 5,000 miles away. And
well, when it all changes, when kings stopped leading their armies into battle.
Yeah.
When it became a management war instead of a leadership role.
Well,
I would like to see any of these blokes and say, you go on the first landing craft. Yeah. You go on the first helicopter. I'll come along with you and see how you go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is managerialism. And if you listen to the higher echelons of the military, they talk in managerial language. It's very it's just out of the business, the MBA school at Australian National University or Sydney University, but that doesn't necessarily equate to leadership, as you say.
Well, that happened with the American military.
Yeah.
If you commanded a platoon, you did 6 months in the field. Yeah. You then went back to an echelon to work on your administration development, which meant that platoon was still there. They got a new lieutenant. Yeah. He made the same mistakes as the last one made, and it got that bad. They would either kill him,
fragging,
and if they weren't too bad, they would wound him. Really? That's the truth.
But they had a verb called fragging. They'd throw a fragmentation grenade.
It happened with a couple of Australians too.
Yeah. But there's nothing as bad as a bad officer, I suppose.
Well, the thing is, they had reached the end of their tether. They were just about ready to go home, and these blokes were making the same mistakes, calling mortars short, calling artillery short. When they got into to fight the NVA and whatever in a set-piece battle was hard. Yeah. They were very good at it. Yeah. They were very well trained, and they'd been doing it for a long time. Yeah. Where we were lucky, and I'll use the word lucky, we never had that. We had the advantage on them. Yeah. They didn't know where we were. They tried hard to find you. We got tracked. They would put people on landing zones. They would try and push you in a certain direction. Now, we got tracked by a fella for 3 days. We tried everything we could to get him. We backtracked, sidetracked, any other track you could think of, and that fella would fire a shot about every hour and a half, 200 metres behind you.
So what was the idea of him firing the shot, just to keep you on your toes?
Just to drive you along.
He's driving you into somewhere else.
He was trying to push us somewhere, but he was an awfully good bushman, and so were we, but we couldn't get him. He knew where we were all the time.
And all his job was, he wasn't to nail you, he was just to push you to...
We laid up one time for about an hour. No shot, no nothing. Yeah. We took off. I reckon we'd been walking for 15 minutes, and bang.
Do you ever reckon that you came across, or there were signs of Russian or Chinese advisors in the field?
I never have. Apparently they did in the north.
Yeah, yeah.
They did, because there were a lot of East Germans involved.
All right.
I even saw Finnish AK-47 ammunition.
Really?
Yeah, and it was excellent ammunition. It was far better than the Chinese and anything they had. That was from that Vetaveri factory in Finland.
Oh, yeah. It's good. They make good gunpowder as well. But so just to looking at the your timeline. So 72, I guess they call it the fall of Saigon or whatever. They pulled out. First question is how did you feel about the pullout, and second of all, what was the next chapter for you?
Well, I come home, and the squadron was brought back to Australia.
Yeah.
I went to the jungle warfare school at Canungra.
Oh yeah.
And the war was still going, and we still had troops going through.
Okay.
Training.
Yeah.
Pre-deployment.
Yeah.
And I looked at the training and I said, this is 6 years old.
Okay.
This training.
Right on.
And I was castigated a bit for commenting that we were so far behind.
Colonel didn't like that, did he, no?
Oh, it wasn't so much him, it was other people there. And I thought should have known better. They were former training team warrant officers and whatever, and I just thought they were just filling, this is me speaking for myself, filling in their time. And like this had changed from it was a massive army with tanks, anti-aircraft missiles, buckets of anti-aircraft artillery and whatever. The only thing they probably lacked was fighters, jets, and like when I just felt it was wrong with what they were teaching. Yeah. And I got into a couple of fairly terse discussions, but didn't do my career bloody prospects a whole lot of good. But I just couldn't see people going and.
But I guess training is only as good as its currency, isn't it? It's like if you're training, like war evolves. Every day it evolves. They'll find another way of trying to catch you or beat you. So if you're training these guys and it's 6 years behind what's been happening, it's going to create more casualties when they go there.
So they were, a lot of the things they didn't want any more casualties. And one thing that really got me, we were talking about a camp contact. If you had a contact in a defensive complex, you would have pulled back 1,000 metres and called artillery on it. And this is what the instruction was. In a lot of cases, you wouldn't see that position 10 metres away, let alone try and find your way back 1,000 metres and then call artillery onto something you couldn't even see where the shells are falling.
So you withdraw from your defensive position.
From their defensive, if you engage them in a firefight, not to pursue the action, withdraw 1,000 metres and call artillery on it. Their whole game was to engage you as closely as they could. The tactic was called hang on to the enemy's belt.
Okay.
So that if you called artillery on them, you've got to drop it on yourself.
Yeah.
And they were very good at that.
Yeah.
But what they would do, they would dig a defensive position here. Yeah. When you engaged them, they would withdraw to another one here, a secondary position. Yeah. When you'd expended yourself here, they would come back and reoccupy their initial position. Yeah. And they were very good at it. I would have to say they are outstanding. Yeah. Giving them a chance to pick their own battle. Yeah. When they had prepared the battlefield, they were very good at what they did. Yeah. And they weren't too worried about how many casualties they suffered.
I think the Vietnamese people seem to be quite tough, you know,
they're
hardy, and they can live on a bowl
they're
of
as
rice.
tough.
And they're obviously highly motivated to do that. And then I suppose with South Vietnam, they used intimidation tactics, you know, on the local populations to turn them. And I guess you do have to feel sorry for the local population, civilians in war, because sometimes they can get caught between the devil and the deep blue sea. You know, if they're seen to
that's all they want to do.
They're giving you information, intelligence.
All they want to do is grow their rice. And we had an incident one day. We were doing a cordon search, and I took the rest of my patrol down, and they were growing there was some corn, so we pinched a bit of this corn and we're cooking it in our mug, canteen mug.
Yeah.
Anyway, there was a hut just near where we were. I sort of haven't told this story too much, but I always thought it was quite fascinating. And this little old lady came out.
Yeah.
I reckon I don't know how old she was. She was pretty old. And she had a little tray.
Yeah.
And on this tray she had some custard apples.
Oh, yeah.
And the caves who were with me, they didn't know what a custard apple was. And she came and she was shaking.
Oh, yeah.
And obviously the man of the house or whatever had sent her out to see what was going to happen. So out she comes and she's got this custard apple. Yeah. And we said, give us the custard. And we said, get the custard apples. And I went around and I said, give us all your cigarettes.
Uh-huh.
He said, keep a packet, give us the rest of them. So when she came out to get the custard apple tray, I had about 3 or 4 packets of cigarettes, which was like gold.
Yeah.
We give them the cigarettes.
Yeah.
But and that woman would have seen the French. She would have seen the Japanese.
Yes, yeah.
She would have seen the French again.
Yeah.
And she would have seen the Viet Cong, and she would have seen the government army.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget the look on her face, and she's hanging on to this tray, and she's shaking.
Yeah, it was.
I thought, you poor woman.
Yeah.
I really did. I really felt for that woman. Here's a bunch of buffets sitting down there, sort of.
But it's just like a little vignette, like a little picture of what war is, and these people are petrified, and she's been through the Japanese and all the cruelty that goes through it. But you're saying you led a patrol, so were you an NCO at that stage? Okay. And when you got back to you were working in the jungle school, working and training. Were you what was your rank then? Were you a warrant officer?
No, I was a corporal then.
A corporal, yeah. And then you stayed in the army for how many years did you do in total?
Well, I did 19 all up.
19. You didn't want to round it off for 20, no? You had enough?
No, I'd had enough. Eileen and I met her and I said, I've had enough of this, but I'd had enough.
Yeah.
I got to the stage on the last patrol we did. We came across a very fresh camp.
Yeah.
And we were going to sneak through this camp and assault it. At any rate, I found myself going around to everybody and saying, you do this, make sure you do that, make sure you do this. And I thought to myself, you're going to be flat out looking after yourself here. These blokes know what they're doing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
and an old friend of my grandfather said to me once, he said, you going in the army, Graham? I said, yeah. He said, try not to get promoted in a hurry. He was a First World War sergeant.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, well, why do you say that? And he said, there's going to come a day where you're going to be flat out looking after yourself than looking after anybody else.
Yeah. And
that's the truest statement I've ever heard in my life.
And it clicked on you when you were saying this.
I said, this is it, I'm glad it's over.
Yeah.
Anyway, we went home, but we went back and I think we were the last patrol out.
Yeah.
And we packed all our gear and came back and flew to Sydney. I got the plane back to Brisbane. I was talking to a cove I went to school with.
Oh, yeah.
He was a policeman. And I thought to myself, well, what's this all about?
Yeah.
You'd have been better off hanging around the Gold Coast and being a beach bum. And I went home and I walked up the stairs and I knocked on the door and Mum came out, and I think she nearly collapsed at the time.
Oh God!
And I said to her, "Well, it's all over, Mum. I'm home."
Yeah.
And the look on her face was
amazing.
Because I don't know what that 3 years away did.
Yeah. And you would have been writing letters to her. It wasn't. You know, you wouldn't have been able to. Were you able to phone even on occasion?
No, but she had some nasty things done to her that people sent her a note to say to the effect that they hoped the plane crashed that
So
we
they got
came
to
home on.
You got to your poor mother.
Yeah, well, she was a widow.
Oh my God!
But during the war there, she had a lot of friends who were prisoners of war and whatever, and they were doing all the cards and packages and
welfare packages,
sending them away. And I don't think she could understand that, and I don't understand it to this day. I don't. Yeah. I don't understand it because it's when you turn on your military, you're turning on your country.
Exactly. Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
A lot of people mightn't agree with that. Yeah. But you want to hope to hell that they're around when the time comes.
Yep. Yeah.
I've heard far too many stories about our country boys and people. They basically took over. That they was quite capable of doing whatever needed doing, or sorting something out, or fixing something.
Yeah. So these are country boys that served in the military.
Oh, a lot have. A lot in the First War and a lot everywhere, but they seem to have a...
Yeah.
Actually, I thought national service was the greatest thing I've ever seen.
The Nashos.
As far as having a line where everybody did the same thing. You had country boys, you had bank clerks, you had Christ knows what else.
Yeah.
And they all helped one another.
Well, I mean, that's one of the things people talk about from time to time would be really great for for some of the young people now. They tend to get, I suppose, mollycoddled at school and all that now, and everyone gets a prize in a race at athletics carnival. That the military service would be a good thing for our society, but then the Australian, from what I understand, the Australian military doesn't want them. We don't. We're dealing with the ones we get at the moment.
You had a whole heap of people from every variation of education, background, lifestyle, all put together. Now, contrary to most of the popular belief, after they'd served with the units and that unit was deployed, they wanted to go.
Yeah.
They weren't running down to the guard room and saying, "I'm not going, lock me up."
No.
And all these people, they'd teach one another maths, drill, whatever. Yeah. Some people were good at map reading, some weren't. And I can still see people there who bonded, who came from the most totally different backgrounds you could ever imagine, and they were the best of friends and best of comrades.
But I guess at the time you identified as being Australian or being a member of a particular unit or a regiment or a company, and that was your identity. But now there's all this identity politics, but it doesn't. It's all fragmented rather than.
Well, it is.
You go to countries now and the people don't even stand up for the national anthem, or they're kneeling down and all that, and you kind of go, "Oh my God!" Like, I've got a friend of mine, a neighbour. I visit him, and he's disabled in a wheelchair from an accident on a farm. And in the Second World War, one of his uncles got lost over the English Channel in a Spitfire on photo reconnaissance. His dad was shot down in North Australia by a Zero in the Royal Australian Air Force, trained in Canada. Another brother, another one of his uncles was captured in Singapore, and you kind of think. It's those people and people like yourself that allow us to enjoy the standard of living that we have in Australia now. And where would we be if it wasn't for that?
Well, I would include myself in that, but there's an American fellow named Robert Howard. He was the highest decorated American soldier in the Vietnam War. He's the same as Audie Murphy.
Yeah.
Now, in the Second World War, he lost his father and 4 uncles as paratroopers.
Wow.
In the one family.
My God.
And he was nominated for the Medal of Honor on 3 occasions. Not just once, 3 occasions.
Wow.
And he went on to become a colonel, and I think he was the most extraordinary man because he had multiples of everything.
Yeah. It's like Saving Private Ryan, like all those people in the one family.
Well, I thought that was an extraordinary gift to the country to lose 4 brothers.
Yeah, yeah.
He died in about 2016.
Yeah.
But I've always thought he was probably one of the, well, you'd have to say it, one of the bravest men that ever was.
Yeah.
As far as that war goes.
Yeah, it'd be a really interesting book to read about him, you know. But we've had a few here in Australia with Donaldson was the other Victoria Cross winner.
Mark Donaldson. The regiment was lucky that we got 2 there. I've known a few, couple of VCs, Ray Simpson.
Yeah.
He came down to our lines when he was coming back to get his Victoria Cross and stayed in our troop lines with a friend of his, Jimmy Stewart.
Right.
He used to take us up to the pub and fill us full of lies and grog for a couple of days.
Yeah,
and it was an extraordinary experience.
Oh, well, it's just to shake someone's hand like that. It's just it's an honour, isn't it? Really.
But he was just the most normal of men.
Yeah.
It really was.
Yeah. But I think it's interesting, and they talk about society, you know, that over time a society gets soft and it needs hard men, you know, to get it back on track. There's a saying, I can't remember how to say it properly, but yeah, soft times create soft men and hard times create hard men.
Well, a lot of those people sort of came out of the Depression and whatever.
Yeah.
We had people in Australia who used to take their swag from pub to pub and bare knuckle fights to, you know, to get the means to live.
Yeah.
And when they went to the Great War, to get 3 meals a day and 6 shillings a day, we were some of the highest paid troops in the world. Australia, Canadians got more, and the poor old Poms got a shilling.
Yeah.
And the Australians got 6 shillings.
Yeah.
Plus marriage allowance.
Yeah.
So 3 meals a day and a wage.
But
it was quite extraordinary.
You know, you spoke to someone who was in the First World War. Was a friend of your grandfather's. After the war, you get into the 1920s in the Great Depression, and from what I understand, things were very rugged in Australia.
They were.
And people became very good shots with their 22s because they used to go out and shoot rabbits, and it kept a lot of people alive. That's what I understand, and I don't think I'm exaggerating.
No, you're not.
And then on the, you know, when the Aussies went back to Milne Bay and they were on the Kokoda track, a lot of them were militia troops, and this is what Blamey called them, cowards or rabbits. They ran like rabbits. But I think those militia guys did pretty well, and they were apparently, you know, fairly stunted in their growth, fairly skinny, runty sort of kids that had come through a city during the Great Depression, and they were told, you're going to meet these Japanese on the trail. They'll be bandy little fellas wearing glasses. They won't have good gear, and they were lying up in ambush, and the next thing they're seeing, these 6-foot-tall Japanese guys, well equipped. None of them had glasses. It was their Imperial Guard, I think.
Yeah.
And these little fellas with their SMLEs and their hobnail boots and the bloody jungle.
Australia's war with Japan was a vicious, hard war.
Oh yeah.
It really was, and the climate and the geography compounded it.
Yeah.
And that there's that many things, and Vietnam was the same thing. You didn't have anybody with a gun to kill you. You had scrub typhus, mites, ticks, any snakes.
Yeah. Tropical diseases.
All those things there, and it's an environment you can either exist in, or you can feel at home in it.
Yeah.
There's really no in between.
Yeah.
And I think that the regularity that we had of deployment gave you, I know in my case, it would be an exaggeration to say that you felt at home in it.
Yeah.
But you were comfortable once you started to understand what was what.
Yeah.
And it took a long time, and I don't think that the 12-month period gave you that ability to learn what signs meant, what noises meant, what you thought they're going to go this way or they might be going to go that way. And to have the strength to do something that's totally... Now, we saw the largest number of enemy troops on the move of any Australian troops. Our patrol. We counted 450 over a 2-week period, travelling up and down, going down to the Tet Offensive.
Holy smokes.
And they would have been 10 metres away.
Holy smokes.
And the biggest problem was not to become too lackadaisical. All you needed to have somebody step off to have a pee or and you'd be found.
Yeah.
And we had to change around so whoever was on the observation point didn't get that.
So you're on an observation point on this known track going in.
Well, actually, we found the track. We thought there was one. We were told there was one there, so we observed that track, and they were all main force or NVA troops coming down. And the problem was, you can become lackadaisical.
Yeah. 10 metres away.
Yeah.
Just the exhaustion of trying to keep alert. How long would old mate be out front observing before he'd be relieved?
Probably an hour.
An hour, yeah.
Or a bit more. Then we had to pull back at night, go back far enough so you couldn't be detected.
Yeah.
We don't know if they were travelling there or not. At night, they probably were.
Yeah.
But that's what we saw in daylight.
And you couldn't make yourself a hot brew or anything.
No. And one of the interesting points, I don't know who belonged to who, they had a number of people who were prisoners who were tied up that they were taken with them. So I reckon they were draftees that they'd grabbed somewhere.
Yeah.
And were taking them to wherever they were taking them to.
Yeah. This is 68, all this prep for the Tet Offensive. Then you're observing this, looks like a build-up, but then it seems like the Tet Offensive in the popular historical stuff is that it was a surprise attack and they didn't expect them to attack on that major holiday and they were caught a little bit with the pants down. Well, I don't know if that's true.
Well, they were. These were troops heading. There was an Australian fire base called Fire Base Julia. We went near there. They were heading down to I'd say down towards the Saigon area as reinforcements. They were extremely well armed. Mm-hmm. Mortars, heavy machine guns, RPGs. They had everything that he... And they're very confident in what they were doing. In their movements, they were just very, very determined on the march.
And this is what you were observing?
Yeah, my patrol commander, Alan Stewart, he got an MID as a result of that observation thing, and he very well deserved, I
mentioned
thought.
In dispatches, is that? Okay, yeah. But then that intelligence has to percolate up through the command, and then someone has to decipher it and put the pieces together and say, hang on, what's all this going to lead to? And I guess the Tet Offensive was a big change in their tactical, their attacking coordinated in mass at strong points that were reasonably well defended.
Well, the whole thing is it was exceptionally well planned. Well planned and conducted. The only problem was they suffered so many casualties in achieving their aim. I don't think they had no idea that they would suffer so many casualties.
Yeah. But for them, it would seem in their philosophy that casualties are casualties as long as you're on the long-term, your long-term goal. So in classic Marxism, they think of the long-term and the war of attrition. They know that guerrilla forces over time can outlast the conventional forces that are sent to defend those places. So they say, okay, well, maybe we lose those, but in the end, this is going to be playing out in the TV sets in America. There's media noise in the background. Well, the academics.
There's probably that in it. I think to a long degree they would have said, even if we lose this, we'll win the media war.
Yeah, and that's where I think the war was won and lost in the media in the United States, and then because we replicated, I suppose, in Australia at the time. But then that's.
Well, Schwarzkopf did that. He controlled the media.
Yes, yeah.
He did that specifically. He said, you go where I tell you to go or you won't go.
Yeah, it was very interesting, but smart move on his part, you might say.
Well, he experienced it in Vietnam too, of course.
Yeah. He seemed to be a pretty good commander, old Schwarzkopf, Storm and Norman.
He learnt the game in probably the hardest school going.
Yeah.
It's a jungle school.
Yeah.
Nothing easy about it, and they never will.
Yeah.
They can have all the drones and whatever. The jungle in New Guinea, if they go to New Guinea, is going to be the same as it was in 1941.
Yeah. It's pretty. Like you just see those cliffs and you think, those poor guys, I don't know whether they had a proper tropical uniform at the time. When they
just had old bloody khakis.
Yeah. And then, was it the 1936 pattern webbing?
Yeah.
There's not much padding on.
Had the worst pack you could ever imagine.
Yeah.
And they still had them in Vietnam till they got something a bit better.
Yeah.
And then just like a sack.
And they're carrying their ammunition, they're carrying the water, and big long bayonet for the SMLE.
Oh, they had to carry the mortar bombs.
And they'd carry them.
And the mortars.
Oh, yeah.
They even had short and 25-pounders that they used to drag around.
Oh, gosh.
And that was simply making the thing. But if you look at a Vickers gun on its own,
yeah,
you got the gun, you got the tripods, you got the water, and then you got the ammunition liners, and they weigh 18 pounds.
Yeah,
a Vickers gun.
Yeah,
loaded liner.
Yeah,
and they used to tie them onto their packs or lash them onto their packs because you could only carry them for so long.
Gosh.
At arm's length.
Gosh.
And the same with the mortar bombs. They'd get sandbags and they'd put 2 bombs on either side.
Yeah.
And hang it over your pack.
God.
And when they marched through to pick up the mortar bombs, they would just have the bags and hang them over your pack.
Don't fall backwards, son.
No.
Jesus.
And apparently they used to bash you like nobody's business because you're trying to climb up and they'd hit you under the ribs.
Even the boots that they had, their leather boots with the hobnail boots in them, and that, they'd get all wet. And I suppose that would have been a thing in Vietnam. Your boots would have to be really important.
And your socks.
Look after your feet. You could get, trench foot and going through all those places as well. But anyway, Graham, it's been fantastic to talk to you. I could be here for another few hours, but I know you've got things to do. But
as long as it was an interesting thing. It's something I've been thinking about for a while.
Yeah.
Trying to do something myself. Because when they're all gone,
Yeah.
like they're all gone.